Good morning, everyone. Good week. Shavua Tov. Today we're starting off another glorious week, the week of Yud Shvat. And we have here our charity box and our charity money. Charity box. Money, here we go. Starting the day off with charity. The Jewish people will be redeemed with charity, and so will the whole world be saved from all negative things with charity, giving charity. And when you give charity, you can also make it on a condition that God, I'm giving charity now, that there should only be good in the world, only be peace, only progress. God should protect all of our soldiers. And maybe it's working. Who knows what this new thing is with President Trump? Who knows? Let's see. All right, here we have this week. We're talking about the giving of the Torah. That's the highlight of this week's Torah portion. The receiving of the Torah. God gives it, the Jewish people receive it. So we see, with the last couple of weeks, we've learned that how the Jewish people got into exile, into Egypt, and that they served there for what was supposed to be 400 years. It ended up to be 210 years. And they got out with big miracles, and the sea split. That was last week we learned. And that took them over. But the whole purpose of this whole thing was to receive the Torah. And really, the Torah is not really the goal. The Torah is also a means to a goal. And what's the goal? The goal is the Jewish people are going to come to the land of Israel. And that's also another step to the goal. The goal is Mashiach. The goal is that a person is going to come. He's going to be just like David, and he's going to return all the Jews to doing Torah and its commandments. And he'll negate all the other religions in the world, because people will only worship the Creator. Everyone will feel the Creator. And he'll gather all the Jews, build the Holy Temple, gather the Jews to Israel. And then the world will be a healthy world. Then we won't have to be occupied with all these negative things that are going on, like sickness and wars and pestilence and famines and fake pestilence and fake famines, etc., like we are now. And so the world will be a happy, productive world. It'll be new all the time. Okay. But here we're talking about the Torah. Now, the whole thing goes according to the Torah. Everything in the world is according to the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. The Torah is not just another book in the library or another book of religion. It's the book of the Creator, why he's creating the world, why this world is so important, what the Jews are supposed to do in this world. We see it's not an easy book to follow, because it's a workbook. It's a workbook for everybody, especially for the Jewish people. So most of the laws in the Torah, 90% of them are only for the Jews. Keeping Shabbat is only for the Jews. Non-Jews are not supposed to keep Shabbat. Okay. But never suffice it to say, though, that God, who is the creator of the universe, he's creating everybody. So he gave a law for everybody. Okay, in order for the Jews to get this law, they had to be in exile for 210 years. And then they had to experience all these miracles, and one of which was the splitting of the sea. And the biggest of which was God's revelation on Mount Sinai, which was even more intense than his revelation at the sea, when he split the sea. So it says over there that right before the Torah was given, it said that Moses spoke and God helped him with his voice, or he answered his voice. That's what it says. Let's look at the sentences. Here we go. Let's look at the sentences. Here we go. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger here. How do we do this? Like this. Oh, bigger. Oh, there we go. Because on the third month from going out of Egypt, they received the Torah 50 days after they left Egypt. The third month after the Jews left Egypt, on this day they came to the desert of Sinai. And they traveled. Let me get my pointer over here. Here's my pointer. 1 second. 1 minute. It says they went from Rephidim, they came to the desert of Sinai, they camped out. Moses went up to God on Mount Sinai. right? They were around the mountain. Moses went up on Mount Sinai, and God called him from the mountain, and he said, "This is what you should say to the Jewish people, and you should speak to." It says here, this the men and the women. God is saying this: "You have seen all the miracles that I have done for you in Egypt, and I have taken you on like the wings of eagles, and I have brought you to me." This is God speaking. "And now, if you listen to my voice and you do, you keep this covenant that I'm making with you, Jewish people, you will be for me a special people from all the world and all the nations in the world. I'm Segula, a special chosen charm nation, because the whole world belongs to me. And you will be for me." God is speaking to the Jews, right? He's telling Moses what to tell the Jews. "You will be for me a nation of priests and a holy people. These are the words that you should say to the Jewish people." Okay? But Moses came and he called the elders of the people and he put from them all these words. And everyone said, everything that God said, we will do. God didn't say anything yet. He didn't tell them what to do, but the Jewish people said, whatever God says to do, we haven't even heard it yet. We'll do everything he says. And Moses took the words back to God. God said to Moses, "Behold, I'm coming to you now in a thick cloud in order that the people should hear when I speak to you, and also they will believe in you and the prophets after you, all of them." And Moses said these words to God. Okay, then we're getting close to the sentence we're looking for. God said to Moses, "Go to the people, tell them to sanctify themselves today and tomorrow, and they should wash their garments, and they should, they should be prepared for the third day, because on the third day, God is going to come on to the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai." It says, tell the people to keep limits around the mountain, saying, "Watch out, don't go on the mountain, or even touch the corner of the mountain, because if you touch the corner of the mountain, you'll die. It's too holy. No one should, and even your hand should not touch it, etc. Because anyone who touches it, a man and even an animal, will die when you hear the shofar sounding." So God came down from the mountain, told the people, and he said, "Sanctify yourself, wash your garments, and be ready for the third day, and don't have any relations with your wives for these 3 days." And it's sure that's what it was on the third day in the morning. And there was all of a sudden, there was like thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud over the mountain, and the sound of a shofar, of a shofar too, a trumpet, very strong. And all the people were very, very afraid. And Moses came to the people. Moshe et ha'am likrat Elokim mina machaneh v'yisatzvu b'sachti zahar. So Moses went to the people and told them, made sure that they were far away from no one was touching the mountain. The mountain of Sinai, here we're getting to the sentence. Mount Sinai was all smoking. It was full of smoke, because God descended on the mountain in fire. Well, that's not exactly like the movie, right? With the smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and and the mountain was shaking. Here we go. Here's the sentence, right? The shofar was very powerful. It kept getting stronger and stronger. Moses spoke, but here it says, it's interesting. Simple. Moses spoke, and God answered him in a voice. Moses spoke, and God answered him in a voice. Good morning, Menachem.
Good morning.
So it said, and this is the sentence that we read all the sentences before. This is the sentence that the mimer is called by. It says there was a powerful sound of a shofar at Mount Sinai before God gave them the Torah. He said Moses will speak. That's in Hebrew. Moses will speak, or sometimes this conjugation of the verb means he is speaking. Moses will speak or is speaking, and God will answer him or is answering him in the voice. What was he speaking? What was he answering? What was it this? Okay, that's the name of the mimer. Then after that, it says that the mountain was, God came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and he called to Moses to the mountain. Moses went up, and God said to Moses, go down to the people, make sure that nobody touches the people, the mountain, etc. Okay, then Moses goes up and he receives the Torah. Good. All right, now let's go back to the mimer. Here we go. Just so that we understand. Moshe Yedaber, Moses speaks, or Moses will speak, and God will answer him in the voice. Okay, the Rebbe is going to say that seemingly this sentence is totally out of place. It doesn't explain anything, and it's the wrong tense, past tense, present tense. It says, the simple meaning is that Moses spoke and God helped his voice in the voice of Moses. Simple meaning of this is that the Jewish people heard directly from God the first two commandments. And then they said, it's too much. We can't take it anymore. Moses, it's too much. It was like, putting a trillion volts into a 5 trillion watts into a 5-watt bulb. Right? The people were here. The creator of the whole universe is speaking to his creations. The human beings are just created by God. And now God is revealing his full force, right? The whole powerhouse is being revealed to each and every one. So the Jewish people said, listen, Moshe, maybe this is what God wants, but it's not what we want. We can't take it. It's too much. So the first two commandments they heard from God. And the rest of the commandments, Moses said to them. How can Moses speak to 3 million people? There's 3 million people waiting around the mountain. There was 600,000 just males above the age of 20. So all the children, all the women, all this. It's 3 million. How can one person speak to 3 million people here? So it says Moses spoke and God helped his voice. Simple meaning, right? But if you look at the sentence, it doesn't make any sense. That's what we're going to get to. Let's go. Well, to understand, the Torah does not explain to us what exactly did Moses say and what did God answer him. Obviously, this is not talking about the 10 commandments, because the first two of the 10 commandments, they heard directly from God. And it says, Anochi omed bein Hashem u'beinechem. I spoke between you and between God to tell you. So what was God answering? What was Moses? Moses, either God was speaking or Moses was speaking. It doesn't say that Moses was the speaker and God was answering him. So what is this sentence saying? That Moses spoke and God answered him. I told you one of the explanations, but that explanation I had to look into the commentaries to see. The simple meaning is not that. The simple meaning is totally not understandable. Gam also lahavin to understand. What does it mean? What does it say that Moses will speak? Moses will speak and God will answer him in his voice. Which is future tense, or hove, or present. In Hebrew, you can also say, you can use the same conjugation for saying Moses is speaking and God is answering. That also fits. But for sure, it's not according to whichever one you take. It doesn't make any sense according to the according to the text. It should have said that Moses spoke and God answered. Moshe diber v'Hashem aneu, and God answered him. Okay, so who's speaking? What was he saying? Why is it in future tense? What does it mean that God answered him? What was he answering him? We don't see anywhere that Moses spoke and that God answered him afterwards. What does the sentence mean? Now, again, we have to remember, the Torah is written by God. God personally wrote the Torah. Everybody saw this. They saw it on Mount Sinai. They knew that it was true, that the Torah comes from God. It wasn't some sort of a light show or some sort of a spectacular thing. It wasn't that Moses came back from whatever is down from the mountain. He said, I have just heard from the Lord. Listen to what I've got to say. The Jewish people experienced all these miracles from God. They know that God is infinite and God creates the world, but God cares about the world and God is active in the world. Everybody knows that. All the Jewish people know it. They came to Mount Sinai. They all know that God was giving them the Torah, right? Not only that, it was too. Let's say that Moses somehow or other, psychologically affected all the Jews, and he told them all, he hypnotized them all, hypnotized 3 million people, and he convinced them that all this happened. It didn't really happen. He just convinced them, gave us somehow or other, right? So, okay, let's say that that's true, right? And Moses did it only for his own greatness, right? So he takes them to Mount Sinai. And what commandments does he give them, right? Don't eat milk and meat. What's it got to do with anything? Give them 2 or 3 commandments, and then that's it, Pray to me every few days, and do a few religious commandments. Honor your mother and father. One of the 10 commandments. How is that Moses, as I say, exercising his rulership over the people, or there's just some sort of a trick or something like that? It doesn't make any sense. The whole business doesn't make any sense. God took them out of Egypt, gave them all this just to tell them, don't kill, don't steal. That's the 10 commandments. Should have given some mystical book that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so everybody in the Jewish people all knew that God exists and that God cares for them and that God chose them and God took them out of Egypt. God, everybody knows. Now they're coming to Mount Sinai. Everybody knows. They've been waiting for this moment. Excuse me. And God is doing the speaking, and everyone knows this. Okay. And that's Judaism. That's what Judaism is, that God himself did all these big miracles to 3 million people. It says that they left back in Egypt. There was 4/5 of the people didn't want to get out. There was 12 million people left back in Egypt that they didn't want to leave. In the future, it won't be like this. But everybody saw, everybody heard, everybody felt God. So what does it mean that Moses spoke and that God answered? It doesn't say that. Moses will speak or is speaking and God is answering. What does this add to Judaism? And what does it mean? What does the whole thing mean? Okay, now we're going to see. It says in the Gemara, the Omer Rav Yosef, the Rav Yosef said, Ilav Hayoma, if it was not for that day, the day that God gave the Torah, the Kagorim, that it brought about big changes, Kama Yosef Ika Betshuka. There are many other Yosefs in the marketplace. And there's this Rabbi Yosef, he was a Talmud scholar, and he said if it wasn't for that day of the giving of the Torah, so I would just be like another person in the street, a professor, who knows what, dealing with the world. I would be part of the world, the normal people that deal with worldly things. Now I'm learning the Torah as I am totally different. Right? I am a totally different human being. I am learning the Torah, and the Torah has made me totally different. I am now a representative of the creator of the universe, and I am serving the creator of the universe, and the world does not have any negative effect on me. I'm only positive effect. I'm affecting the world. Yosef, there's a lot of Yosefs in the world. And learning the Torah makes you a totally different human being. It doesn't mean it takes away your free choice, right? A person can learn the Torah and he can, become a different human being, and he can use all of his differences for his own egotistical purposes. That's, of course. But nevertheless, at least the opportunity is given. When you learn the Torah, you have the opportunity, the chance to be totally connected with God, which is not the case with any of the other religions or whatever. You're connected to some spiritual level or whatever. Okay, so he said this, the Torah, if it wasn't for that day, it says the Havin, that's the idea of the giving of the Torah. It changed a whole entire nation. Let's understand what this means. What is that day, which is the day of the giving of the Torah? What exactly happened then? What exactly happened then when God gave the Torah? Let me make this a little bit bigger here. How can I get this? It's supposed to be this big plus sign that comes up, wherever. Look there. It's not making it big for me. Why not? What did I do wrong? Usually this plus sign comes up over here. Oh, here it is. 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 I spoke to some. There it is. Good. Okay. What is exactly happened at the giving of the Torah? Now, as far as I know, there is no history book. There's a lot of history books in the world. There's a lot of big history professors, history of the world. Even those that have the history of the Jews, right? They don't include this whole story about the giving of the Torah. They don't include the story. The Jews say, they did say that. What exactly happened? What happened over there? What's the necessity of the giving of the Torah? Now, I know we've said this a lot of times, but I just want to repeat it. There's a lot of religions in the world, and almost all of them are more successful than Judaism. There's a bigger percentage of the people that believe in them. There's a smaller percentage of the people that oppose them, right? How many people oppose, right? Oppose these different religions. They're against it. In Judaism, maybe half of them openly oppose the religion, openly oppose, right? Let's not go so far. Even at the time of Moses, the Torah tells us that everybody opposed Moses. Everyone opposed Moshe. We'll learn about Korach was against Moshe. It says that the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf. They did against Moshe. They went. So what's this whole business? The God took them out of Egypt, and he made all these miracles, and he gave them bread from heaven, and he gave them this, and he took them to Mount Sinai, and the Sinai was shaking, and they couldn't take it. Why do you have to do that for? All the other religions are based on one person, comes from the desert or somewhere, a couple of people, and they say, we have had a dispensation, we have had the experience, we have seen the Lord, and we're telling you what, then everybody says, oh, wow, let's just bow down to these guys. And here it is, here's the book, here's the, listen, even more, most of these books, like these religions, the book of the religion, right, with the church, with the Islam, the book was written like 100 years after the whole thing even happened. So it wasn't, they didn't even see it happen. Here, all the Jewish peoples, God made it that everybody saw God give the Torah to them. They all received that directly from them. And these other religions have like 2 billion people, 1.5 billion people, and they're making wars, they're killing each other. And Judaism has, what is it? How many people, Jews are there in the world? 15 million or something. I mean, it's ridiculous. And half of them, maybe now the number is bigger. I mean, let's say half of them are not openly, at least half of them, are not openly observant of the religion. They don't hold with it at all. And there's a good 1/3 of it that they're just totally against the whole business, right? So what did the whole thing do? What did the whole giving the mountain? Why did God do it? God didn't know it was going to be this way. Why didn't God just make Judaism like the other religions? Moses comes down from a mountain, and he comes to Jewish people, and he makes a deal with Paro, right? He brings Trump with them or something, makes a deal with Paro, says, listen, we'll have our land, and we'll do this, we'll send the exports to you or something like that. And that's it. If you got a people, you got a religion. What's the problem? No, it has to be that God takes them out of Egypt. Big miracles. Mount Sinai was the biggest miracle of all. Never have been in the history of the world has been a miracle like Mount Sinai, where the Creator spoke to the whole entire nation, 3 million people. And it's not written in any book. That's just too unbelievable. And that's what religion is based on, Jewishism. And it seems it didn't work. Okay. Says the Rebbe, I have even bigger questions, the Rebbe says. This giving of the Torah, what's going on? It says, we believe that Abraham was called the first Jew because he did the whole entire Torah before it was given. Abraham. The Torah exists before the world. The Torah exists. The Torah is the blueprints for the world. So the Torah existed before the world was created, before there was time. Before there was time, the Torah existed. Time only began when the world was created. So the Torah was there before. So it says that Abraham was so devoted to finding out what the truth was that he actually knew the whole Torah before it was given. So he knew the whole thing. It says he even knew the laws that the rabbis were going to give. Eruvi Tabshilin. It's a rabbinical law. Because Shalomad Kol Torah, it says that Abraham learned the whole Torah before it was given. So if Abraham already knew the whole Torah before it was given, why did you have to put all the Jewish people into exile and take them out with big miracles and split the sea and take them to the mountain, and the mountain was shaking with thunder, lightning, and fire and everything like that, and people were going crazy? Why? Just Abraham could have just given it to them, right? Like it says, it says that Abraham, it says that he did all my commandments, my negative commandments, my positive commandments, and my Torah. Bavare, certainly he taught this whole thing to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak taught it to Yaakov and his sons, the 12 tribes. So if so, the 12 tribes, that was the fathers of all the Jewish people. So the whole thing of Torah is teaching it. So they taught it over. So what was the big novelty that God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai if it was already known? Abraham knew it, the tribes knew it. Achine, know that it's known that the whole idea of the commandments. Oh, the commandments are called, there's positive commandments and there's prohibitions. The positive commandments are things you're supposed to do. Things you're supposed to do. There's 248 positive commandments from the Torah. 248 things you have to do. Jews have to do. It says the Ramach Pekurim, the 248 commandments, inun they are, this is Aramaic, inun they are, Ramach Evorim de Malka, the 248 limbs of the king, of God. So the 248 commandments, positive commandments, putting on tefillin, the keeping Shabbat, positive commandments of Shabbat. The taking a lulav, etrog, etc. There's 248 of them. A lot of them are in the Holy Temple. A lot of them are in the land of Israel. But nevertheless, the 248 positive commandments, these are the 248 limbs of God. L'chior, at first glance, ain't no movement, it's not understood. Listen, evorim. What does it mean? They are the limbs of God. What, God has limbs? I thought that God didn't have. Hello, ein lo demuta guf. God hasn't got any body. But the commandments are God's arms, his tongue, God's nose. What's going on over there? He says, no, that's right. The commandments are the limbs of God. Good, okay, but how many limbs does he have? When I put on tefillin, so, I mean, that's a different time. Let's say somebody in Australia, he puts on tefillin at a different time. When I do lulav etrog, it comes over, the holiday comes in after me in America. So everybody's doing the different. How many limbs does God have? Everybody's a limb. What does it mean? Chiyuvan, it's understood. Al pi mashkatu, what it says in the Zohar, to call Ma'aseh mitzvahs, that all of the commandments, hey, they are la'atakna, to fix up, to correct raza, the secret, the shmei of God's name. Sheba mitzvah zu, when you do one commandment, mamshich shem zeh, you draw down another name of God. Uba mitzvah zu, and in another commandment, you draw down another name of God. Okay, just like a human being has limbs, and each limb has, this is called a finger, and this is called a hand, and this is called an arm, and this is called a nose, this is called this. So each limb has a name. Has a name. But the name of a thing is external to the thing. By the commandments, the name is internal. From different names come different commandments. Here, the inyan is like this. The names of God, these are, in general, the 7 names which are not supposed to be erased. Right? The name Elokim, the name Kael, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, etc. There's the Haim, and they are, if they're written down, you're not supposed to erase them. That's why a lot of times what I write, for instance, you write God, you write G-D. Because you're not supposed to, even to erase God's name, even in another language, you're not supposed to. That's from the rabbis. But from the Torah, there's 7 names which is forbidden from the Torah to erase. The Haim, they are, is the level of hispashtus achayos, the spreading out of life, v'hashpa'ah, his avos, to create from God's emotions. Lacha Hashem Agadula v'Hagavura v'Tiferes. These are expressions, the names, I'm sorry. From these names come God's emotions. She'enan ela b'chinas shem bilvad. They came, God's emotions only come what's called from God's names. What does that mean? Like, for instance, a person called a name, right? You call a person Shlomo. So his name is only for other people. That his name should be called. So a name of something is what attaches that thing to what's outside of it. Because God, Ram Vanisa, God is elevated. God is before the world. We have no idea what this means. So in order for God to create the world or to interact with the world, there's different what's called names of God. Like it says in Tikkun Zohar, it's a book of the Zohar. It says, Lav Mikal Ilan Midos Kalal. God is not any of his emotions at all. God, you are wise, but it's not any sort of a known wisdom. So what do we see? That God interacts with the world. That's the whole story of the Torah. The whole story of the Torah is that God creates the world and he creates man, and then he starts giving man commandments, right? He put man in the Garden Eden and says to work on it and to preserve it. That's already commandments. What does it mean to work on it? What does it mean to prevent? And then God says to man, do this, don't do this. Right? You can't don't eat from this tree. You can eat from all the other trees, but this tree you shouldn't eat from. The fact that God is interacting with man shows that God is, so to speak, coming out of his oneness. Sorry. God is coming out of his oneness. God's oneness is not limited to being outside of the world. In other words, God creates the world. He cares about the world. But those aspects of God where he cares about the world, God's kindness, God's severity, those are only aspects of God. Like a name, they come from God's names. Like a name of a person, he doesn't need a name when he's by himself. Even the highest aspects of God, Chachma, it's translated wisdom, but Chachma, Chachma really means like pure godliness, life, pure life. Even Chachma, it says that God is wise, is Chachma, but it's no sort of wisdom we cannot possibly understand. Because God's wisdom, Chachma, Hayediyah, He ben Nivroim, Shenikra B'Shem Chachma. Because what we have in our mind, awareness, consciousness, that's called Chachma. This is Haskalah, this is the power, excuse me. That this is what's called intellect, to understand one thing from another thing. It's by God, lo sheikh, it's not relevant that God has to understand something because nothing is outside of him. Even God's what's called thought, which is below God's wisdom. It says, lo machshavotay machshavotechem. God says, even my thoughts are not like your thoughts. So then what it says in the Torah, that God spoke, it doesn't mean that God spoke in a normal way, even though that in the end that it came out that everybody heard God speaking. But God's speech is not like any other type of speech. How much more so God's wisdom, God's kindness. We're talking about infinite. This is infinite. God's voice was an infinite voice. How can I have an infinite voice? If it's infinite, no, how can you can't hear it? Articulate your words, please. Right? God says, if it says, can you just please speak a little clearer? I mean, don't blur everything together. We can't take it. That's not speech. How can you have infinite speech? Right? Speech has to be divided. It has to be pronounced properly. Every word was infinite. That doesn't make any sense. How much more so God's thought? How much more so God's emotions? These are aspects of God, but nevertheless, they deal with the world. That's why God has these names and emotions to deal with the world, because the world is very important to God. Utmost importance. That's the story of the Torah. It's called Chachma Machshava. If God's thought and God's wisdom is incomprehensible to us, then why call it any names at all? Because it's the source of the wisdom and thought that we have here. Our wisdom and our thought comes from God. So from the world, we can learn something about God. We can't say that God is too far away. Can't say he's too far away. The fact is he's infinitely farther away than what we think. But on the other hand, he's also infinitely close. He creates the world, he creates us. And he wants us to learn. In order to do this, that's all what's called God's sphirot and God's names, etc. Because if you don't say that God has all these, then you'll start worshiping people. You'll say that God is just too far away. We have to worship some person or some spirit or something. because with you is the source of life. In your light, we will see light. What does it mean? In your light, in the light of yours, God, that's drawn down below, then we can see and we can have a little bit of understanding of where this light comes from, where God's wisdom comes from, where our wisdom comes from, where our kindness comes from. That's what it means that man is created in the image of God. The fact of the matter is that our wisdom and our kindness and our emotions and our thought, really, if you think about it, they're big miracles. They're big miracles. But it's nowhere near as big miracles as those of God. Those of God are just totally incomprehensible. But on the other hand, God is the creator. His wisdom, etc., always is, always was. It's beyond time. Time is just a creation. Before 5,700 whatever years, there was no time. But was there was a God? We can't understand that. But the fact is that's the way it is now also. It's totally incomprehensible. But on the other hand, it's a commandment to try to understand it. That's the only way we can serve God. That's the only way we can love God. Okay, also the level of God's kindness, like also it says that God does kindness for thousands of generations. Sheyesh alafim medregos. There's thousands of levels of what's called God's articulation is he contracts and he how do you say, limits his wisdom and his kindness so that it can finally be in this world, kindness in this world, right? So that rain will come in its proper times. There's an infinite process of chaining of life in order for it to come to us. That's all these angels and all these things that all the angels are burning up. That's part of the spiritual process that comes up. Listen, it's also like we say, we're created in God's image. The process that it takes from when a person decides in his mind, right, I want to pick up this pen, right? I want to pick up this pen. So the process that it goes from your brain until it comes down into your hand picking it up, there's probably like 1,000 different stages that go through that. So first of all, your soul has to desire, and then the soul expresses itself in the brain. Then the brain expresses itself in the nerves. Then the nerves express themselves in the muscles. Then the muscles pull the tendons. Then the tendons pull the bones. Then the bones pull, and you feel with your fingers that you're doing something, and your eyes coordinate with what your hand is doing. This is a tremendously complicated process. But thus it happens in a second, because that's life. But it's the same thing with godliness. The whole world is one big unit of godliness. And for God to decide something and for it to come into the world, there's a whole process. And that's what's called God's names and God's, like it says, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom, like it says, the kindness of God is the whole day. She'en bechinas Shem bilavad, there's only names of God. But after it is drawn down and comes to being revealed, this kindness of God and God's wisdom and all these levels which are infinitely distant from us, but in order for when they are finally revealed, it is malubashas mamash b'midas chesed. It really comes down to actual physical kindness in this world, right? Actually, physical kindness in the world. The farmers need rain. Suddenly, the rain comes. Physical rain. When your car is stuck, all of a sudden somebody comes along to help you. All of a sudden you get a job from nowhere. All of a sudden, right? People meet. They get married. How did he find his soulmate? It's God's kindness. It's all miracles. But the thing is that we have to remember where it comes from. That's the point of Judaism, to remember and constantly Who's really directing this whole business? That's God. That's what it means that God and his vessels are all one. I mean, God, I'm sorry, God and his lights are all one. The lights of God, the spirit, and also God and his vessels are all one. Within lights and vessels, the inside of the flow that comes to this world, God's kindness, that's one with God. And even the kindness that comes into the world, actually raindrops that come down for the farmers, that's pure godliness. That's what it says, that God is the knowledge, and he is the knower, and he is the known. There's nothing outside of God. But these are big mysteries, because God gives us free will, and he makes it seem that he's separate from us. And that's the whole entire Torah. Like it says, to you God is greatness and power, that it's all united with God. Totally. Is the drawing down of life. Okay, so what's the Rebbe talking about? He's trying to explain what exactly happened in Mount Sinai. So he says, well, at Mount Sinai, there was a revelation of God. So the Rebbe says, okay, now let's understand a little bit, what is this God thing? What are we talking? What is God? What is God? Right? And there's a lot, there's one of the commandments, the second commandment of the 10 commandments, don't worship other gods. Don't worship other gods. What? There's other gods? There's really other gods? So of course there are no other gods. There's only one God, but there's a lot of forces in the world that you might mistake them to be gods. And when God appeared at Mount Sinai, so he clarified what it means, the God you're supposed to, worship. The whole world. The one God the whole world is supposed to worship, and non-Jews are forbidden to worship any other God. It's one of the 7 Noahide commandments. You can only worship the God that took the Jews out of Egypt and gave them the Torah and creates the world. That's the 10 commandments. Right? I am God that took you out of Egypt. When did God say that? When he was giving the Torah? The 4th commandment is God created the world in 6 days to keep Shabbat. Okay, non-Jews don't keep Shabbat, but they should know that there's a creator that creates them. All right, so now we're trying to explain a little bit how really unique and I'd say incomparable was the revelation of God at Mount Sinai. Nothing in history vaguely ever occurred. Also not to the Jewish people. Also not the Jewish people. Pure godliness was revealed. Okay, so this drawing down of life and creative force, spreading of Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of God, and being put into chesed, in his kindness and his wisdom, that there's no comparison to it. The Antu Chacham, like we say, God, you are wise, but no sort of wisdom that we can possibly understand. That God is not any one of these aspects of all. In order that this should come into the world, in an arousal from below, it depends. You want God to be revealed in the world. In the beginning, God did it all on his own. 6 days he created the world. 6th day, the end of the 6th day, he created man. And he said to man, okay, God said, up to now, I've been doing the whole thing. I'm putting the whole business in your hands. The whole thing is in your hands. Not 100%. Not 100%. You do 50, I'll do 50. When you look at it closely, you'll see that really man is doing nothing. I mean, God is really doing everything. He's creating us. He's creating us again. But nevertheless, God put half of it in our hands. You, man, you are the one that controls the world. That's how it goes from now on. You pray, I answer. You do what I want, I'm satisfied. You don't do what I want, I'm not satisfied. I don't reveal myself in the world. You don't pray, I don't answer. We're talking about God here. So it says, since God created the world, and he created the world with all these contractions and revelations and levels and things like that, from going from above to below, so that's what God did in the 6 days of creation. But afterwards, at the ruta and an arousal, dilatata from below, Tulya depends milta the whole thing. Al Yedei Maisa Mitzvah, by means of doing the commandments. Al Yedei Mitzvah, when the Jews do a commandment, Shehi B'Chachma, which that mitzvah versus learning Torah, Mamshich is drawn down godliness into Chachma of the world, the wisdom, life force of the world. When you do a commandment which is from kindness, you draw down the infinite light of God into kindness in the world. This is drawing down. This is drawing down. God's name and God's name and bringing this name into God's wisdom, God's kindness. It says Havaya Yudke Vavke. If it's punctuated with a patach, with a straight line, patach, that's chachma, etc. So there's a lot of different names of God, a lot of different. We had gematrias. Remember Ma, Sa, Gban, different names. Then here we have another thing which we haven't learned before. Is the name of God can also be articulated in different ways. In the prayer book, there's some prayer book, in the prayer book of I've seen prayer books where every time in the 19 blessings we make in the Shmon Esrei, that each time it says Baruch Atah Hashem, at the end, it's punctuated differently. Sometimes with a komets, I think a komets that's a keter, and a patach is chachma, chachma, and a tzeiri, I think is bina. You have to look and see it. One side. Therefore, it's because the mitzvahs are called the limbs of God. Why are they called limbs of God? Kamosh and maluba, just like there's life there's a person in his limbs. For instance, ad until the person is united with them. Also, the infinite light of God is drawing down through his names in like wisdom and kindness in the commandments. Until it is united with Oren Sof Baruch Hu, which is drawn into them. So what's the Rebbe saying over here? The whole world depends on the Jews. The whole world depends on the Jews. And maybe you might think this is a little bit bizarre, but there's no other religion or philosophy or group or race or whatever you want to call it that even makes such a claim like this, that they represent the creator of the universe to improve the physical world. All the other religions are getting you out of the world to go to heaven, or at least to get through the world somehow or other, or to experience heaven here, wherever. But the main thing is the world is not good. According to Judaism, the world is the best. When God created, it's Tov Me'od. But we have to reveal that in the world. The whole revealing of how precious this physical world is only that's in the hands of the Jews. And in fact, this physical world is infinitely more precious and godly and holy and happy and surprising than all the spiritual worlds put together. That's the job of the Jews, to reveal the unique holiness of this physical world, which is infinitely greater than heaven. And that can only be done through the commandments. When the Jews come do the commandments. Now, even if one Jew does the commandments, this does it. But ideally, it's not supposed to be that way. Mashiach, one of the jobs of the Mashiach is that he's going to bring all of the Jews back to doing the commandments. Now we can understand what is the whole idea of the commandments. Shekatuv, that is written by Abraham. It says that Abraham, Yishmor Mishmarti, that Abraham did all the commandments before they were given. How could that be? The Hainu Shagorim, that Abraham caused by means of his deeds a descent of the infinite light of God, Vitlabshuto, and he brought it in closer to this physical world in God's wisdom or God's kindness by means that he himself, Abraham, became a vehicle to God. Every moment of his life, he was truly devoted to why am I alive, God? Tell me what to do. I want to make this world a holy place. I want to fix up the world. I want to do what Adam was supposed to have done. What should I do with my arms? What should I do with my eyes? What should I do with my legs? What should I do with this? And by means of that, he came to understand all of the limbs of God. That's because he loved God. Haloch v'naso negva says that he traveled to the south. This is what's called Rotz v'shov, going up and coming back down. He came closer to God, and then he realized, now I have to personify what I've just learned Abraham constantly. Because the whole thing of Abraham was he wanted to come close to God, but more than that, he wanted God to be close to the world. So he was always coming closer to God and then bringing the knowledge that he had, the awareness, back down into the world to doing physical things. That's why it's very amazing. I mean, that really was basically the reason that I became religious, like over 50 years ago. I read the story of Abraham and I was just knocked out totally. I said, this is not a religious man. Where is the religion over here? It doesn't say any rituals. There's no holidays. There's no ceremonies. There's no commandments. There's no miracles. God, he didn't do any miracles. And God promises him all these things, and God doesn't come across. You're going to be like this. Your children will be like the stars of the sky. And it's going to be through Yitzchak. He's going to be your son, and he'll have children like the stars. But before Yitzchak gets married, take him and kill him. And Abraham says, "Oh, okay." He's wrecking God's whole promise. The whole thing didn't make any sense to him. Says the Rebbe that's the whole point, is that Abraham is not interested in impressing you. Abraham is interested only in doing mundane things that God tells him to do to make this world a holy place. That's the thing of Abraham, that because of his tremendous desire to, because he realized that he was put in the world in order to do what God wants and make the whole world holy. And the world is a terrible place. The world is a terrible place. Our job is not to get out of it, though. It's to reveal the good that's hidden in the world, the treasures that are hidden in this confusion in the world. Transform the whole world. Because it's ruach, eisi ruach, v'emshich ruach. It says because our spirit that we give up to God, this brings a resultant spirit from God, and it draws down another holiness. Like it says, im yasim alav libo. It says if you put to God your heart, then God will answer you. And also because Abraham increased kindness in the world. It says, Vayita Eshel, he made a free hotel in the middle of the desert to give to the tired and thirsty and hungry wanderers that were wandering around. Why did he do this? Because he was very, very humble. Like Abraham said, it says, Anochi Afer ve'efer. I am just dirt and like ashes or something, Abraham. In other words, Abraham felt every single second that I'm being created. Why am I being created every second? To serve God. It's just a big miracle that I'm being created, right? Every second is like an amazing gift. So Abraham felt every second is a gift, but it's not just a gift, it's also a responsibility. He felt, I am responsible to God. What do I have to do? And God sent him all sorts of jobs to do. And therefore, by means of this, and when a person decides that he's going to be devoted totally to the Creator's desire to make this world a good place, as by means of this, then God is like reflecting waters, that God reflects back to him, Al Yadei Anava, by means of Abraham's humility, he drew down light of God into God's wisdom and to God's will, that it should be coming down into this physical world, that God's infinite wisdom, which is infinitely high, should be in this world. Even though that God himself is none of these attributes of wisdom or kindness or anything, God is infinite. But nevertheless, it should be revealed here in this world. There's no comparison to God. How can you do this? It says because that's the way God set up the world. God set up the world that if we do something, he's going to react. That's the way. That's the laws that God set up. Like it says, so when we're the place where you call God great, it's really, you can call God great because he came down so low. So when Abraham became humble himself, he didn't become angry when people did him bad. He didn't become jealous when somebody was better. He was totally humble all the time, thinking, what can I do more to serve you, God? Being jealous, being angry, being depressed is not serving God. I can't do what I want. I'm just doing what you want, God, all the time. And that makes him happy, tremendously happy. That's one of the things God wants. You should be happy in serving him. And by Abraham just throwing his own preferences away and thinking only what does God want me to do in this world to improve the world, is by means of that humility, is God also came down. He became humble. And then we can start to attribute aspects to God because he has come down. You can see God's greatness, God's oneness, God's the holiness, all those things are aspects of God lowering himself to be relevant to us. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, so what are we talking about now? What do we get up to now? What is God? God revealed himself on Mount Sinai. What was revealed? What happened? What did God reveal? Said God, main thing, not only that, well, he gave the Torah. Said the Rebbe, but the Torah was known before. Abraham knew the whole Torah. What do you have to have all these miracles for? And all these, the mountain is shaking. None of this is that Moses spoke and that God answered him. He will answer him. What do the sentences mean? So now we're starting to talk. He says, okay, let's get this thing set. Let's get it, first of all, in the proper perspective. God is incomprehensible, but God relates to the world. And that aspects of God that we see in the world, that's a result of our arousing God. And God reacts to what we do. And that, so to speak, brings godliness down into the world, makes the world the perfect place that God wants it to be by means of our arousal of God. What we give up to God, God reflects back down to us. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Well, let's do this here.